I'm back.
So this is a wonderful conversation. Thanks, everybody. Typically, so the way these events work, typically being in person, we open the doors at 6:30 and the talks start around 7. We've been starting around 6:45 just because conversations haven't been going as well as they have as today. So how's everybody doing? Not a lot of hi, everybody. There's a lot, 24 people in here. Hi. Cool. So we're going to diverge a little bit from the JavaScript land, and I'm going to talk a little bit about CSS, and it all kind of makes sense why I'm talking about it because it's important. But first, I wanted to mention to everybody, there's a bunch of new names out there, and not everybody has their cameras on. Has anybody not heard of now South Florida Tech? It used to be Palm Beach Tech. All right, well, if you haven't heard about it, join their Slack channel. Their Slack channel is very active. A lot of questions, a lot of comments going on. If you have a question and you need it answered, post it in here. I guarantee you there's someone in there willing to help you out. If you see a question in there and you might know the answer, start a thread, help them out. Very active developers channel. If you're looking for a gig, there's a gigs hiring. All right, this is company. Palm Beach Tech is a nonprofit organization dedicated to making Palm Beach a tech hub that's now expanded to South Florida. So there are a bunch of companies that are a part of this association that are looking for talent just like you. So James, this is a great resource for you, right? Browse this, put your resume up on the system under talent.
I think James, you just did post your resume, didn't you, last week?
Yeah, I did that multiple times, just trying to show Todd my design of my resume, and it kind of gave some trouble for the administrators working on the site. They had to manually remove any duplicates.
Nice. Well, put them to work. That's what they're there for. They're here for us, right? They're here for the community. Put them to work.
I showed my latest draft to Todd, and he told me it's a lot better. So I thank you, Todd.
Yeah. And James, cool. I think Jeremy on the South Florida Tech, I'm not sure exactly if it's $831 or earlier, but they're raising their prices to $100 a year. I mean, it's well worth the membership, but it's only $50 right now. So anyone that's not already a member, you should get on the site and join it because there's a lot of good events and things like that. And so it is a great, very, very good networking site. I loved heading up to West Palm Beach and enjoying the Monday night talks in person. But this is a good alternative too. But no, it's definitely worthwhile. But definitely, if anyone's not a member, I would join now and be part of it. Joe Russo and Nikki Cabas are both super people to get connected. And if you're worried about referrals or just knowing people, those two resources are also excellent.
Yeah, knowing those two people and having them in your Rolodex and having them aware of you and your availability are top-notch people. Joe knows everybody. I don't know how he does, but he knows everybody.
You still use the Rolodex, you're in trouble. But anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely. So definitely check that out. I run a nonprofit organization called Code Palm Beach, and I'm always looking for volunteers for both mentoring students and contribute to open source. Code Palm Beach is a nonprofit organization dedicated to teaching kids to code. We used to be in person, but due to the current world events, we have now shifted everything over to virtual, and that has created a need for a higher demand for volunteers because the ratio of in-person mentor to students was 1 to 5, and I've ran it with 1 to 20. I've been the only person at times, but we really need that 1 to 2 ratio because interacting with a student who doesn't know a computer on the computer is really hard to do. So if you have some free time on Saturday, they last about an hour and a half tops. And a half hour is just orientation. We can use a lot of more volunteers to come out for these events. We have one event every month, and we're looking to up that to go a little bit more. If you're a beginner or if you're a super senior or you don't know a bunch about front end, that's a lot of the technology we use, that is absolutely okay. You just need to be one level ahead of where the students are. The students are starting from bare minimum. So if you know HTML tags and can read a description and find new ways to explain it to them, you're going to help out. That's going to be great. I have a couple of open source projects. Typer is a tool to teach kids to type. I would like someone to help finish the translations on that, Enrique, and create web lessons for me and just general typing lessons. The idea behind this is to teach them to use the keyboard while sneaking in a web lesson, but under the scenes, right? So I can use some help with that. So codepalmbeach.org, and then check out my github.com/Jermbo, and it is a Cosmic Typer. That's the open source platform I have. I've got some issues on there, and if you just want to help create a lesson, I can use that as well. Thank you so much for listening to that. And without further ado, we'll get into the talk. All right, so the question has been popping around for a while. Every time CSS comes out with a new feature, this comes up. CSS PreProcessors obsolete. CSS-in-JS makes CSS PreProcessors obsolete. Who here uses Sas or Less or Stylus? Everybody? Can you guys live without it? Am I preaching to the choir? Am I going to convince you that we still need it? All right, this one's for Todd then. I'm going to convince him he still needs it. So hello, my name is Jeremy. You can find me at Jermbo on all of these Twitter, GitHubs, and CodePens. CSS and the PreProcessors. So historically speaking, writing vanilla CSS has been a pain. If we were building a system of any size and complexity, we would have CSS files that are hundreds, if not thousands of lines long, right? So it's going to be difficult to find things. Potential for duplication and specificity are going to be much higher, right? I might write some code on line 2, and then down on line 2002, I'm going to write that same code again. And we all know with CSS, last one in wins. So if I'm changing line 2 and I forget that it's on line 2002, specificity is getting weird. Team collaboration is super difficult, right? If I'm working on a team of more than just me, and we're working in one file, merge conflicts all day, every day. Who's right? Someone's going to delete my code, I'm going to delete their code, and it's going to get crazy, right? So, and then vendor prefixing. You remember back in the day where we had to do all that stuff? Thankfully, that is going away, but it's still an issue, right? Vendor prefixing, border radius, Moz border radius, WebKit border radius, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to do any of that. That's hard. All right, preprocessors came to save the day. They augment your authoring experience, but they came with initial drawbacks first, right? For the first time, front-end needed to introduce a build pipeline. That was new. Weird syntax was trying to be introduced. Does anybody remember the original Sas, the SASS version? They took away the semicolons and the curly brackets, and everything was tab dependent. I hated that. I used less to start off with because of Sas. The browser, the editor support wasn't there for it. And I was always tabbing and spacing things wrong and getting all sorts of compile errors. Breaking things into partials and variables caused a little bit of a mind shift, right? That was not something we're used to. We're used to working in one big, large file and then separating button Sas and variable Sas and typography Sas. Was a weird shift for me. And then with the preprocessors, we started getting the first signs of logic, right? So the question that I posed at the beginning is, with all of the CSS advancements lately, do we still need a preprocessor? That's the overall arching question that I want to ask and or answer throughout this talk. First, I need to talk about some features that have been coming to CSS, right? Have we all heard about custom properties, aka variables? Media queries level 4, feature queries, variable fonts, CSS grid, scroll snapping, all sorts of amazing stuff coming to CSS. Okay, these features are great, and we don't need a preprocessor. Well, in this talk, I want to demonstrate the top 5 reasons that I still use preprocessors, and it's going to be a vital tool in your arsenal. At the end, I'm going to demonstrate a project that will demonstrate how to use modern CSS properties and modern CSS techniques with CSS preprocessors. Quick note, with all of these examples are going to be using the Sas, the SCSS version, but the principles can be applied to any preprocessor. If you're using Stylus or Less, If there's any other out there that I don't know, these should still apply. All right, the top 5 preprocessors. I've taken a look at all of the projects I've built over the past several years. I've been using Sas for what? 5 years now, 6 years now? How long has that been out? I've been using less for a little bit longer, right? I started less in 2014, I think. And the things I use in every single project are partials, nesting, maps, loops, and functions. Loops and functions are something that have come later in the life cycle of CSS preprocessors, but they're still something I use over and over and over again. So let's talk about partials. By a long shot, partials are the feature I use all the time. I like the idea of smaller, more meaningful files, right? This allows me to have better team collaboration. So if I'm working on button Sas file and you're working on typography Sas file, we're not going to clash. We're committing to the code base 2 separate files. There's no longer the merge conflicts in one giant file. File organization helps mental overhead too. I know I'm in the button CSS file, and I know I'm only should be touching button CSS, button related CSS. The developer experience is a little bit better as text editors have gotten a lot more feature rich and code completion and showing you colors and all sorts of good stuff. And with CSS, with Sas, you get optimized output by default. If I want to ship to the browser a minified file, that comes as an option as a preprocessor compression. I can expand it, or I have another build set that I need to do something in. Whereas vanilla CSS, I need to run it through a process. Okay, well, there's that. I want to take a quick moment to talk about how to structure your folder, organize your project. There's 4 different ways that I've seen that are really popular out there. The 7-in-1 pattern, the full 4 file organization. If you click on any of these links, the markdown file is available on my GitHub. If you follow any of these links, read what they're offering and see what works best for your project. The folder structure can vary from team to team, and whatever makes sense for you, team is perfect. There's no wrong answer here. So I don't want people to get hung up on, this folder structure versus that folder structure. It's whatever works for you. It doesn't really matter. But file organization is a key to your sanity, right? Having things all willy-nilly all over the place is a recipe for disaster there. All right, feature number 2, nesting. Okay, so when I said I use partials all the time, I lied. The thing I really, really love the most is nesting. I can't live without it. Don't tell partials about that though. But in all seriousness, these 2 go hand in hand. I can't use one without the other. I'm always separating things into partials because of file organization, and I'm always nesting where it makes sense. Let's take a look at an example. On the left-hand side, we have normal CSS, and on the right-hand side, we have Sas. At first glance, it's the same line of code, right? It's still about 15 lines. The thing that I don't like about the normal CSS is I have to write button over and over and over and over and over again. In this context, I'm writing button once and I'm nesting everything inside there. So just one level of indentation inside a curly bracket, top and bottom. I know everything related about this is going to be related about button. So that's a cool benefit. But really where I get power from this is utilizing the Bem methodology. Has anyone used a methodology like Bem? Do I have to explain what Bem is? I'll take a quick side note and talk about Bem methodology. It is block element modifier. It is strictly a naming convention that allows you to apply class names with meaningful names, right? A div doesn't mean much. A user card means more, right? So you give a div with a class of user card. Now, one of the biggest adoptions for me using Bem is how well it goes hand in hand with Sas. I'll show you what I mean. Let's take a look at this markup. This is Bem methodology. I have a block, which is post. I have children, which is post head, post title, post body, post text. All right? We don't have any modifiers in here, but we have blocks and elements. I know these are elements that go along with post because post __head can only live there, should only live there. If I see post underscore underscore head outside of post, I've done something wrong, right? Topic for another day. The social links. That is a block. Blocks can live within blocks. So now this is start getting to an area where we can compose things. I lied about the modifiers. We have social link dash dash Facebook dash dash TW dash dash YT. Those are modifiers. Every social link is going to be styled the same. The dash dash FB is going to change it in some way, give it a different background color, etc. Now, here's how I would write this in Sas. Here's a way you can write this in Sas. This is in a post.scss file, and I have my post curly brackets. I'm using this ampersand. In Sas, this is a concatenation, right? So the output of this would be post, post head, post title, post body, post text. Okay, I like this. There's a couple of drawbacks for this. If I'm working on a large file, what is the ampersand underscore underscore head? One could make the argument that since I'm in the post file, that this is the post underscore underscore head. That's a good argument. But a lot of times not everybody follows the rules of keeping one thing in a file only related to that. So I might have multiple underscore underscore heads in there. Okay. And then another concern I have is down here. Are there enough curly brackets that are closing? The more I indent, the more curly brackets I need to have. Modern editors kind of solve that problem because they'll tell you it's wrong or won't format properly, and it'll help you identify where that's at. But before, this is a problem, and this is a problem that stuck with me during the times of bad editor support. And then the modifier. And then how do pseudo classes get handled, right? The modifiers and the pseudo classes just keep adding to that level of indentation. So the larger head gets, or the larger body gets, or the larger text gets with the modifiers and the hover states and all those pseudo classes, the more farther away I'm getting from post. So therefore, I'm losing the context of where I'm at. Again, totally valid solution, works, just not my preferred way. Here's how I prefer to write all my Sas. I have post. It is self-contained. Everything related with post lives inside there. Now, everything with post underscore underscore head lives with its own curly brackets. Notice over here in post text, I have the ampersand on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side. Whereas in the post, I have ampersand dot dash inverted. This is a modification that I've made to Bem. I love Bem, but some of their rules make names really, 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 really long on the HTML. And I've worked on trying to consolidate that. I have a talk, I don't know if I've given it here or not, about architecting your CSS, architecting your front end. And this is where I demonstrate what that is. Essentially, on the left-hand side, it concatenates. So I'm going to get post and then post dot inverted. That's going to be the output. If it's on the right-hand side, it means it's a parent selector. So I'm going to get post text on one line, and then I'm going to get dot dash inverted post text. So the inverted is now a parent selector inside of that. And the reason I love this is because all of the things related to post text is within those two curly brackets. And that's important, right? Now let's look at social links. So the individual social link gets ampersand dash dash FB, TW, and YT. And the output is exactly what you think it's going to be. So the button example I gave is a little arbitrary. It didn't seem like I gained a whole lot. I feel like I'm gaining a whole lot of simplicity in my code versus the output it's going to give, just by these simple changes. So I talked about a couple of reasons why this is good, but I want to point out these three specific reasons why the version I'm recommending this is good. One, the output CSS is going to be post underscore underscore head. So when you're looking at your dev tools, post underscore underscore head, I can copy that find in my project and find post underscore underscore head. If it was the ampersand underscore underscore head, I might have 20 of those in my project, which one am I referring to, right? So if I have a post or an article or a person or product, and they all have heads inside of their hierarchy, well, which one am I referring to? I have to now do more mental calculations to figure that out versus a find and replace. My location context is really close. If I nest everything inside of the parent element, post, the longer my file gets, the further away I get from post, the more I have to realize where I'm at and make sure I'm doing everything right. And then the last item is my closing curly brackets go down. My general rule of thumb in this context is do not nest more than 3 deep. If you have to nest more than 3 deep, reconsider what it is you're trying to do. And there are times where nesting 3 deep is appropriate, but every time I do that, I'm questioning, is this the right thing to do? Do I need to separate something out and make it a block? Right? Only use modifiers for parent and only use ampersand for modifiers and parent selectors, and children elements should be on their own line. So these two are the biggest things that I use in preprocessors, hands down. Does anyone else have the similar experience? They feel like they're using this over and over and over again? It's the best feature. All right. Now, with later renditions of Sas, less stylus, list and maps, I feel have gotten a lot of attention and a lot of power over the years. What it started off with wasn't very powerful, and it's gotten way better over the years. All right, so lists. So just like we talked about, good file organization can go a long way to preserving your sanity. With lists and maps, we can go even further by grouping, by organizing groups of relevant values, right? So a Sas list is essentially an array, right? From JavaScript land, we've all dealt with arrays. It's just an array of information, array of strings, array of numbers, whatever the case may be. The syntax is pretty straightforward. We have our variable declared on the left-hand side, and then parentheses. And each individual value is separated by a comma. I don't think there's any limitations for mixing and matching. Is this a number and the next one's a string, or this, that, and the third? I just group like data together, so I tend to not have mixed cases in there. I don't think there's a limitation to do that. So here's a couple examples. Font weight, spacing, color, sizes. Ooh, there's an error here. Can anyone spot it? Sizes doesn't have parentheses.
Yeah. And also shouldn't it have, should that be in quotes or it's okay like that?
I don't think it matters, but probably not. I don't know why I put them in quotes. Should probably change that. Okay, so Sas Maps are a set of key value pairs. They're very similar to lists. They're a little bit more powerful. The syntax is much like a JavaScript array or a JavaScript object, where you define a key and you give it some value, comma, key, value. The only difference between JavaScript and Sas is their parentheses versus curly brackets. Right, so we have our font weights again, light, colon, 200, comma, medium, 400, etc. So we have our font weights, spaces, color, sizes, represented the same data, different ways. There's different use cases for using both. So let's talk about how do we access this data. Now that we've created the data, how do I access it? To access a list, I utilize the function provided to me from Sas called list.inf. It accepts the list variable, so whatever variable name I gave it, font, weight, colors, sizes, and then the index I wish to get at. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. To access a map, it is utilizing map get, which takes 2 arguments. The first one is colors, or the variable, and the second is the key that you want to access. I tend to use maps more than lists just because my brain works with key value pairs more than it does with lists. Lists are absolutely acceptable, but map gives color or variable, and the key is typically what I'm using. This is pretty powerful. Now, a lot of the arguments come into play with using CSS custom properties. Why do I need this versus a custom property? We'll get to that. So, loops, the next topic. Lists and maps are great when organizing your code, but outside of organization, they don't offer very much, right? They're just random variables. Where this comes into play is applying a loop. Loops allow us to iterate over each item and output a desired value. There's the same syntax or the same each loop will attack either a list or a map. The difference is the map will give you the key and the value, whereas the list will give you just the value. Where'd it go? So in this example, I have sizes and icons. In my block, we have icon, and I'm outputting all of the sizes. So I want small, medium, and large items. This is outputting icon dash dash small with a width and a height of 40 pixels. Then it's outputting medium with a height and width of 50 pixels, large, etc. And the same thing with the glyph down here. So notice I'm utilizing the same thing, the same each method in sizes and icons. I just want to get more information out of icons. So with icons, I've made up the variable name and made up the variable called glyph, key, value. The reason I want the key is because I want that to be my CSS selector. All right, so in my HTML, I'm going to have a class with icon dash dash HTML, and that's going to give me the content of this glyph. It's pretty powerful right there. When I've really harnessed the power of this, I've been able to create up systems that scale, because when starting a design system for a new project, we're only thinking about the scope for sprint 1, 2, and 3. Inevitably, I'm going to get new icons. I'm going to get new colors. I'm going to get new pieces of information that need to scale. And with a system like this, if I were to handwrite this, there's a lot of duplication, a lot of copying and pasting, a lot of room for human error of me copying and pasting and changing.
Jeremy, I think anybody who's ever used something like Font Awesome, for example, you can apply like the name of the icon, the size of the icon. There's all of these different selectors. If you had to code those all by hand to create Font Awesome, it would take, it would be forever.
Decades.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
There's a million icons with every single type of modifier. So this is how, obviously, without this, you can't do that. You can't build a system like that.
Absolutely. And scaling gets harder too. So the more Font Awesome adds stuff in there, all I have to do now, because this is essentially the start of Font Awesome in that context, right? If I have a new icon in here, I just add it to icons. If I have a new size that I need to do, I just augment the size variable, recompile, and it outputs everything for me. That's the beauty of loops. And this was a level up moment for me. Partials and nesting, that was cool. That was just made my developer experience better. What made me a better CSS architect was thinking in loops. How do I take these lists and maps and create systems out of here? And this is when I noticed a jump in my abilities. Functions. Here's another leap in understanding things. Sas functions are just like functions everywhere else. They are a bit of reusable code that can take an argument and optionally return a value, right? We know that from JavaScript. It's not weird. Syntax. Pretty straightforward, following the sassy way of doing things. Function name, pass in a variable. And we can have as many arguments in here as we desire, but we have just one in this context. There's another type of loop where each is going over over in a list or an array. A for loop is just a random for loop, right? So however many numbers I need to count. So this is making a long shadow on the text, and it's outputting the box shadow and taking care of the degree iteration for me. And color invert does exactly what it says. It inverts color, takes in a number, an amount. The default value that I want to give it is that colon and whatever value I need to set it at. So I can only pass in color and it'll still work. Here's an example of how it works in practice. I have a color primary variable and I want to set the H1. I want the H1 to have a long shadow and I want to invert the background color. I just call it by invoking it where I need it. But there's a bit of a problem. There are times where Sas and CSS functions collide. Sas has come with a bunch of predefined functions that CSS is starting to adopt into the standard, right? These versions with each other are incompatible. But there's a really, really, really elegant solution that when I show you, it's going to blow your mind. But if you didn't know this, you would spend hours trying to figure out why this is a problem. I want to point out Anna Tudor's brilliant article on CSS tricks. She goes into excruciating detail of all of the known issues between Sas and CSS native functions. And the excerpt coming up is straight from her site. So she gets all the credit for the next part of the talk. So in Sas, we have a min and max function. The problem with the min and max function in Sas is that they only accept the same value. Type, min 20 pixels, max 50 pixels. In CSS, I can mix and match units of measurement, like you see on screen, 20 EM versus 50 VH. I can do that. The Sas compiler will throw an error saying that they're incompatible units. Same thing with the calc function, right? It starts getting weird when we start. This is valid CSS, but invalid Sas. CSS variables are a problem as well. When I try to use this in CSS, it's completely valid. In Sas, it's not. So HSL, RGB, A, etc. So I mentioned the article goes into all of the examples, but she also explains the solution. Simply uppercase the function. Sas is case sensitive. CSS is not. That's how we get around it. And you can mix and match too. Like I have RGB lowercase a. You know, I have capital M lowercase in. Mix and match. As soon as the casing does not match what Sas's functions are, it'll ignore it. It won't try to output the file, or won't try to do its sassy computation and give you the value you're looking for. All right, Sas and modern CSS features. Any questions so far about what I've talked about? We've talked about the top 5 things I use over and over and over again.
Jeremy, just to point out, there's a question from Zane in the chat that says, does anyone know of a good resource for advanced Sas? Like maybe a Udemy course? I think there's a good, Udemy advanced Sas course.
Yeah, there's a couple that I have. At the end of the talk, I'll look at my Udemy because I think I bought 1 or 2 that I've watched and can recommend. So
there's also a playlist by the Net Ninja on YouTube. I've never seen the Sas specifically, but usually he's top notch.
Can you find the link and put it in the chat?
Yes, I was just gonna say that. I'll get you guys a link.
Yeah, there's a couple YouTubes that I know that are pretty good. Let's see. So any questions about what I've talked about? The top 5 features: partials, nesting, lists and maps, loops, and functions. Cool. Now, all of these are using Sas features, but I want to use modern CSS. I want to use CSS Custom Properties. I want to use min and max and all that good stuff. So let's look at an example. So this is up on my CodePen. If you guys want to check it out, I will drop a link in there. And this is going to look a little daunting because it is all in one file, and I'm a big advocate for separating, but CodePen, right? I could have made a project, but whatever, all right? The HTML is nothing special. I've got a bunch of H1s through H6 and paragraphs with a couple of classes on there to extra large versus extra small. So without having to rewrite all these things, let's look at what we are talking about. I got this inspiration from this article here. It's been a while since I looked at that article, so I'm not 100% sure if this is a straight rip or if I've added my own flavor to it. But this has definitely influenced how I set up my system. So when I talked about using loops and functions and other things like that, with CSS Custom Properties, this article is the one that took me to the next level there. So I have a list of variables. These are just random variables that I'm going to add to my site. I'm going to need them, and I'm going to use them as they are in the system. Layout, I want a uniform way of calling what my extra large spacing is versus my extra small spacing. So predefining this with the padding is a cool way to go. Notice with maps, I have a map. The first key is a map itself, right? So I want to point that out, that we could have a nested solution if necessary, and we can do a loop within a loop. So all of your logic that you can think of how you would do an array of an array of an array in JavaScript, same concept here. Whereas this one, max container widths and grid breakpoints, has anyone ever looked at the Bootstrap source code? I straight up stole this from Bootstrap's source code. This is their grid system. I just added,
not in a while, but yeah, I've looked at it for sure.
I just added extra large. The reason being, the designs that I've been getting from the clients that I've been working on, the designers are designing for 1600 pixel wides, but these Bootstrap stops at 1200. That's a huge gap that I need to account for. So I've augmented that in my own system. Right?
Jeremy, while you're talking about Bootstrap, James had a question in the chat of, he was asking, can Bootstrap do the same thing or is it different?
What do you mean by do the same thing?
Like, can Bootstrap utilize SASS?
It is. Under the hood, it's built on Sas. Historically, it was less, but they've converted to Sas since Bootstrap 4 fully. Like 3 was less and Sas. And this is a topic for another discussion, but how to theme Bootstrap is to not use the min CSS file, but instead download all of the Sas files, import what you want, you create your variables file that overwrites their default variables. So if you don't like the Bootstrap blue, you import all of the functionality you want, the buttons, the layouts, the carousel, and then last thing you import is your variables. Yeah. Or not last thing, but one of the things you import are your variables that'll overwrite the Bootstrap variables. So that's using Sas under the hood.
As long as it says import, as long as it has the important key over the rule in CSS or SASS, right?
No,
I'm getting off topic.
A little off topic, but not too far. The bang important or the bang default is a weapon to be used carefully with intention, right? If you're just putting bang important on everything, that would be a part of my rule to rethink what you're doing. Are you doing the right thing?
Okay.
Cool. So, yeah, I augmented Bootstrap, took what they had and added the breakpoints I needed. And anybody familiar with Tailwinds or Bootstrap or any framework like this, I've been seeing this pattern pop up over and over and over again. The idea is to create variables, right? white, gray 1 through 9, amber, cherry, green, whatever, right? Whatever the names of your colors are, doesn't really matter. The point of these variables are to not be used in your system. So I don't want to see in your code amber reference for your color, right? The reason being is if I change the color for amber to orange, purple, green, if this hex color changes, does this variable name make sense anymore? And the answer is no, right? So using this is not the point, right? But I do want a variable to hold a value because I might use amber in other places when declaring something. Oh, look, right here. Here's my map, right? I have brand, colors, primary, secondary, text, background. This is a design system that I'm creating, and I'm picking the colors from up here to output throughout my system. So I'm going to be using the map get colors primary base. I'm going to get that information and make sure I have cherry. So if the base ever changes for whatever reason, I have one place to do that, and my entire theme updates accordingly, right? That's the bee's knees. Do that. Typography, very same thing, right? Fonts and my sizes. Now I have a distinction between my text sizes and my title sizes, right? So that's why I have font sizes and then a map within a map. I want that distinction. I want my title to be a lot bigger than my CSS or my text sizes. And we see the output of that over here, and we're building up to that. We haven't translated this code into that to the visual yet, but we're building up to that. This is me just declaring variables at the moment. Okay, a couple of functions. I don't typically write map get throughout my code. What I do write is this function, color, or this function, font. Right? So in my H1, I'm declaring font size to be this, to be font, title, and then MD. Right? That's what I'm declaring. The reason being is because I want to utilize the CSS Custom Properties as well. And again, this part right here is coming from the article linked above in this repo. All right, two that other two things I stole straight from Bootstrap is the min screen and max screen. I haven't written a media query since media queries came out. I write min screen and then whatever size breakpoint I want, max screen, whatever size that I want. And the reason I do this is because it is to eliminate the pixel differences I might add, right? If my breakpoint is 480 pixels, I don't want the opportunity for me to write 479 or 481 throughout my system. I want that consistency. So this is me utilizing Sas to help me code cleaner CSS. The output is going to be more consistent by me adhering to these systems I'm setting up. Fluid type, topic for another discussion. That's pretty cool. All right. So we've learned about maps, lists, loops, all that good stuff. How do we use CSS custom properties? Well, we all know CSS custom properties need to be defined on something. So here is where I'm using the power of Sas to output a slew of CSS custom properties for me. So if we take a quick look at the view compile, look at this. There's my CSS custom property for my layout, for my colors, for my fonts, right? How I'm doing that is by organizing everything into these variables, into these maps, and then looping through them. So the reason I pointed out that these are two-dimensional arrays, two-dimensional maps, I have a loop in a loop. So layout, the first name is the padding. The second one is the map. So that's why I'm calling in and C over here. And then I'm outputting the layout. And this is called string interpolation, right? Where I'm breaking out of Sas for a moment to say that I want to concatenate the value of this. So instead of literally putting $name, it'll be the value. So that's why we have layout, padding, small, layout, padding, large, layout, padding, whatever. And then the C is the value. Same thing with the colors. Name, color. Boom. Now, so this is, that's all the setup. That's all the setup we need to do. We run it, we see the output. Now we're going to start utilizing it. We're going to start using this in our system. So with the background, I created a function called color. I'm passing in the layout or the category. Category is background, and I want a light background. For font, I specifically want the family because I have font for type and sizes for title and text. And then also weight. So now the output of all of this, right? I'm just using this over and over. And this is the direct output that is making the visual happen over here. If I view compiled again, Shazam. Usually I do these things in person, and now would be the time where you all gasp. Can you all unmute and collectively for me so I don't feel so
nice.
nerdy?
Ooh.
Thanks, one person. All right. So the high-level takeaways from what I just showed you, again, take a look at the code pen, but assign variables names that describe what they do, and don't reference those in the code, right? Assign variable names that describe where it'll be used and reference that, right? For example, brand primary is much more meaningful than amber or green or purple, right? Because as soon as I change the value of what purple is to anything else, that doesn't mean anything anymore, right? The other example that comes to mind is danger or warning or info. Those colors are meaningful names versus the red, yellow, and blue you might assign to it. Because what if you want like an orange red? What if you want like a sunflower yellow? I don't care what those colors are, but as soon as you change the value of those hex, does that variable name make sense? Maps can be utilized to better organize. Create helper functions to make retrieval easier. If I had to write view uncompiled, if I had to write map get with a map get colors name in this, wherever I wanted to use this particular color variable, I would hurt. That wouldn't be fun for me, right? I'm lazy. I think writing var dash dash whatever category, whatever name, I could handwrite that, but what if I just made a function called font and pass in title and XL? Less writing for me. It's going to output a little bit more, and it's going to give me the power of using CSS Custom Properties in Sas. And mix-ins, I didn't talk about these here. That's a topic for another day. But I often get the question, like, what's the difference between a mix-in and a function? And really, I don't see a difference between the two. They act the same way, but the way that I distinguish between them is mix-ins are to help keep code dry. So if I have a bit of reusable code, like I'm always going to make this type of container display flex, justify content, right and center, and align item center. I don't want to write that in all of these components. I can make a mix-in called base flex and include that mix-in in the class that I'm creating, because it's just a way for me to not have to write those 3 lines over and over and over again. Whereas functions, I'm typically right? Functions typically return something. Again, in Sassy world, there's very little distinction between their differences, but I separate them by doing that. And then loop over repetitive tasks, right? If we look at our code here, I want the output of this font text SM through XXL, right? I'm not going to write this out. I have the map in place. I'm going to loop. That's what I'm doing. Wrap up. Wait, I just did that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about what I've talked about? Now's the time for Q&A. Zane, go.
Well done, Jeremy.
Did you actually have a question, or did I unmute you?
No, you're fine. Actually, I was going to ask, do you have a link for those that slide with the links for like the file structures and stuff like that, 7 to 1? And...
Yep. If you go to github.com/Jermbo, I'll put the link in the talks or in the show notes, the chat. I don't know why it's so hard to say. I have a talks repo. If you're curious about the other talk I was referring to, I have it in markdown form right here, the architecting your front end, and then CSS PreProcessors. There's the markdown file.
Gotcha. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yep. All the links should be in there. And you can see my latest commit is typos. Sorry. I can't has English.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So the breakpoints, I'm leading a project right now, and we're getting a lot of new designs, and this is in a startup, and they've been like, we have like some really advanced designers, and they're like cranking out a lot of designs, and the designs are iterating and changing a lot. And this is like the first time I've had like leadership on front end in like a project like this. Like I've been in like big code bases, but I wasn't in charge of it or whatever.
Right.
And so one thing that I like learned a while back from Brad Frost, I think it was when you're doing responsiveness, because we have Bootstrap in our project, but we're starting to phase it out because we overwrite it a lot, and we're getting like highly custom designs at this point. But our CSS is very like Frankensteinish right now. It's like it's getting better. But one thing that a new developer on the project just asked me was like, what are our breakpoints? Because I see we have different breakpoints all over the place. And this goes back to this article I read by Brad Frost. It was like a couple years ago. And he was like, don't have like set breakpoints. Like you make the media query when the design breaks. Like when it's adjusting and it breaks, then you adjust it. And that is something that I've started to do because I stopped using Bootstrap, those things, a while back because they were just always a little bit off. So I always end up writing a media query. And then now on our new designs, like they're changing a lot, and then like you never know where the design will just go off. So in other words, I write a lot of custom media queries, and I'm like very like, and my responsiveness is perfect. It looks perfect because it's customized pretty much. But I just don't know how you choose those breakpoints, or like, are you like imposing upon the designers?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Impose. So there's two types of responsive design thought processes. You have adaptive responsive design, and then you have fluid responsive design. Let me see if I can find an example. GL Homes is a site I worked on last year. And this is adaptive responsive design. And I'll tell you what that means in a second. Let me find a real good page. Let's go to our homes. Okay, so you see this breakpoint here, this container that it's in. This is a very bootstrappy concept, right? The idea behind it is, notice the gap between here and here, and here and here. I'm going to grow. Nothing changes in the middle, but this gap got bigger. Going to change. Boom. Notice everything got bigger, and the gap got smaller. The reason this is working is because of the adaptive responsive design principle, meaning I have a set container that is going to be this size between breakpoint, between pixel 1200 and 1000. This container is 1000 pixels wide. Now, if I'm below 1000, right, in this case 1500, my container is the lowest breakpoint, the size. So in this context, I'm between 1450 and, wait for it, 1200-ish. Boom. My container was 1200 pixels wide, roughly, right? And then between 1200 pixels and 1400 pixels, the container is going to stay the same. This gives me fine-grained control over this content here. With fluid responsive design, meaning everything is based on percentages and there's no fixed container that you have. Look at the word none. It's not going to do it for me because bam. There are times where in typography, in print typography, there's this concept called a widow. A widow is the last word in the last sentence is alone on its own line, right? If you see that in print typography, you need to either cut some words out to where you don't have that last thing on there. You need to adjust kerning and spacing between your letters or your words, but you still know your fixed container. You have other variables to change, but the width of what you have isn't going to change. With responsive design, you can't control that. So what Brad Frost is talking about is when things look crappy, create a breakpoint there and then fix it. The problem I have with that is, how long does that happen? Why can't we rethink our design system or put more thought in the development of the designs so that way we can avoid some of this? I'm a big firm believer in adaptive responsive design over fluid responsive design for those reasons. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yes, I have to study it a little bit more, but so do you tell the designers design for these screens, period? Like, how do you convey to the designers, like, we'll get these designs that are like super intense, and
the thing that I do in that context is weigh out cost benefits, right? How much time do I have allocated to build this thing versus is there anybody on the team that is capable of executing the design you're asking? So the collaboration between design and front end it should be a two-way street, right? Because they're designing, if they're not thinking about how this is going to be built, what's the point, right? You are the voice of reason into design. Be like, okay, I see what you're doing there. I like that, but this is more complicated than you think it is. Can we rethink this? Can we display this information in a different way? Can we not touch edges? You know, go full screen with a width in this context, right? There's a dialogue you should be having with the designers to help illuminate what the constraints are that you're working on the web. It should not be the situation where designers working off in a silo and they throw it over the fence, unless they're working with a bootstrap type grid system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we definitely push back a lot. But they're just like a machine. They just like crank it out fast, and they're like iterating a lot with the business team, and like we can get a new design, and the design is like substantially tweaked from the previous iteration, and then like there's stuff on this ticket that is just for this, but there's like, you can see lots of other designs that are like changed.
Yeah.
So now you're like,
welcome to Agile.
That now? So yeah, it's definitely an ongoing conversation. I just didn't know how much you are the one that's like giving them parameters, you know?
Oh, 100%. So there's another thing that I do that I'm working on a project right now where I'm helping another team in my company clean up their HTML. They're working with a design team who is using Zeppelin or Adobe XD or Figma or whatever, right? Any of those online tools. Love those tools. They're great tools. The problem with those tools are if the designer is not meticulous and uses the same color or the same font sizes or the same padding or the same whatever, the CSS that Figma or Zeppelin or whatever puts out, if you're blindly copying and pasting that in there, you're going to get a slew of inconsistency throughout your system. So what I do to solve that problem is say, hey, designer, what's the gray that's going to be our medium gray? What color is our text going to be? What is our button going to look like? Right? What sizes of our fonts is going to be the title, the body text, the subheading, the whatever. Let's define those and put them in variables like we're seeing here. So I will have consulted with the designer and we would have come up with this information. Right. Now, in the design tools, if they use, you know, FFA, right? And then we've agreed that FA is the right grade that I should be using here. I don't care what they use. I'm using this variable. Right. So that's another thing you can do to add sanity to your process of we've predefined these constraints. Here are the variables that we agreed upon toward the beginning of the project or at the middle of the project where you're at now. If you're telling me that I need to introduce a 10th gray in here, where does that change? Like why? Like what are we doing here? Does that make sense? So have those conversations. As a front-end developer, you're the bridge between design and back-end development. Back-end development is I don't know how to design, so I'm going to do whatever Zeppelin tells me to do. I'm copying and pasting that stuff in there, right? So your main job as a front-end developer is, hey, designers, let's rein this in a little bit. Hey, back-end devs, here's the HTML and CSS that I want you to connect data to, right? Here's the markup. You loop through this and make it persistent from the database, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.